Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine settling into a hotel room. You pull your luggage off the floor, and then you spot this tiny reddish-brown speck crawling on the sheets.
Or maybe you've seen those headlines about, like, multi-million-dollar lawsuits. There was one for $21 million claiming damages, bites, and just intense emotional distress.
All linked back to this one. Incredibly persistent pest.
Yeah, it's a scenario that's just become far too common, really, globally. You see it in hotels, dorms, theaters, even department stores sometimes having to close temporarily. It's a growing public health problem.
So today, we are doing a deep dive into the world of bedbugs. We've got this stack of sources, articles, research, guidelines, and our mission is really to cut through the panic, figure out what's really going on.
Right. Understand their biology, how they made such a dramatic comeback.
Exactly. How they spread, and crucially, arm you with the knowledge of how to spot them, how to prevent them, and, well, how to deal with them if they show up.
We're really getting into the nitty-gritty, the science of why they're so tough to kill, but also that hidden personal impact they can have.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. What is a bedbug? Like, what do they actually look like?
Fundamentally, they're small insects, parasitic, and they don't have wings, so no flying.
Right.
Their main meal is human blood, but, they're not picky. They'll feed on pets, birds, even rodents if people aren't around.
And they're not microscopic, right? You can actually see these things.
Oh, absolutely. An adult is maybe about the size of Lincoln's head on a penny, say 4 to 7 millimeters.
Okay.
Before they feed, they're really flat, oval-shaped, kind of like a tiny reddish-brown apple seed, almost like a little disc. But after they eat, after a blood meal, their body sort of elongates and swells up like a little balloon and gets much darker, more reddish-brown, 6 legs, and they have this beak-like mouthpart for piercing skin.
And the young ones.
The nymphs, yeah. They're smaller, and they can be almost translucent, which honestly makes them pretty hard to spot.
Okay, a tiny blood-feeding disc that balloons up. Do they? Do they multiply quickly?
They certainly can. It starts with these incredibly tiny pearl-white eggs, pinhead size. You might even see a little eye spot inside if they're a few days old.
Wow.
They hatch in maybe 4 to 10 days. Then the nymphs, they need a blood meal before each molt, and there are 5 molts.
5, okay.
Yeah. So under good conditions, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks to go from egg to adult. And get this, an adult female can lay 5 to 8 eggs every single week.
Whoa, okay, that adds up incredibly fast. So when they're not actually feeding on us, where are they hiding all this time?
They are absolute masters of hiding. Tiny cracks, crevices. They usually gather within, say, about 6 feet, maybe 2 meters of where people sleep or rest because, well, that's where the food is.
Makes sense.
Favorite spots. Mattress seams, definitely. Box springs, bed frames, furniture nearby, even behind baseboards, inside electrical outlets, under peeling wallpaper, or in the folds of curtains.
So pretty much anywhere near the bed.
Pretty much. And research shows they actually prefer dark places, especially black, blue, or red surfaces. They tend to avoid glossy finishes.
Like tiny vampires, just waiting in the shadows until nighttime.
Exactly. They're mostly nocturnal. They come out when we're asleep, drawn by our body heat and the carbon dioxide we breathe out.
Okay, now this is where the story gets, well, kind of alarming, right? Bedbugs weren't always this huge problem. They were actually pretty rare for decades after World War II. So what happened?
Yeah, this is the heart of their comeback story. And it really boils down to 2 big things happening together. First, after WWII, we had these really effective chemical pesticides like DDT. They just knocked the populations way down.
So we kind of thought we'd won.
For a while, yeah. But then the bedbugs, they evolved this biological superpower, resistance. They started becoming resistant to DDT way back in the 1950s.
The 50s, that early.
That early. And as we introduced other chemicals over the decades, organophosphates, pyrethroids, they just kept adapting.
So our best weapons started failing.
Essentially, yes. And then you add in health concerns, which led to restrictions on using some of those powerful chemicals indoors. So we ended up with fewer really effective tools. Organophosphates were phased out for public use in the 2000s. And pyrethroids, which are still common, well, they're just not working as well because resistance is so widespread.
Okay, so they evolved faster than we could keep up, basically. What was the other big factor?
The other huge piece of the puzzle is global travel, just more people traveling more often, farther distances. We inadvertently became their main mode of transport.
We carry them.
Yeah, in luggage, on clothes. We just carry them to new places, places that might have been totally free of them before.
Wow. So it's the combination, are pesticides getting weaker and us basically giving them free rides around the world? That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was the perfect storm. That, plus maybe a decline in some public health pest control programs. It created the situation we have now.
And like with any big problem, there are tons of myths flying around. Our sources helped clear some of those up. What are some of the biggest misconceptions?
A really common one is that you have to throw away everything. All your furniture, your belongings. That's just not true, and it adds so much stress and cost. Proper treatment doesn't mean trashing your stuff.
Okay, that's really good to know. What about, do they fly or jump?
Another myth. Nope, they're wingless, cannot jump. They crawl. Now, they can crawl pretty quickly, which might make people think they saw something else, but it's just crawling.
Got it. And bites. Are they always obvious? Do you always feel them?
Not at all, and this is so important for detection. They actually inject a little anesthetic when they bite, so you usually don't feel it happen.
Great, stealthy.
Very. And what's more, a huge chunk of people, sources say maybe 30 to 60%, have no visible reaction to the bites. None at all.
Wait, seriously? So you could be getting bitten every night and have no clue, no itchy red bumps?
Exactly. You could be feeding an infestation and not even know it based on bites alone.
That is deeply unsettling. It makes finding them early so much harder.
It really does. And adding to that challenge is the myth that they have to feed every single night. They don't. They can go weeks, sometimes even months, without eating, especially if it's cooler.
Which means a small infestation can just hang out undetected for a long time.
Precisely.
Okay, so they're tiny, sneaky, they've evolved to beat our chemicals, and they travel the globe with us.
Yeah.
How exactly do they get from, say, a hotel room to my house?
Their main way is passive transport. Hitchhiking, basically. They grab onto things we carry, luggage is the classic one, but also backpacks, coats, purses, used furniture, even books sometimes.
So they're like these tiny, unwanted souvenir collectors.
You could put it that way, yeah.
And this is why travel is such a huge risk factor, isn't it?
Absolutely. Probably the most common way they invade a home is someone returns from a trip, maybe stayed in an infested hotel or lodging, and the bugs got into their suitcase or onto their clothes. You just unknowingly carry them right inside.
And bringing in secondhand furniture, too, you mentioned.
Yes, that's another big one. Always inspect used furniture really, really carefully before bringing it into your home.
Now, once they're inside a building, especially like an apartment building or a dorm, can they move around on their own between units?
They can, yeah. It's less common than the hitchhiking route, but they can spread actively. They can crawl through walls, follow pipes or wires, slip under doors. They can definitely move between adjacent apartments or rooms.
That really underlines why this is a community issue, not just, one person's problem.
Yeah.
We've heard about infestations shutting down hotel floors, dorms, even those department stores you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And that $21 million lawsuit,
Yeah.
it just hammers home that this isn't just about itchy bites. It's disruption, it's serious money, and it's real emotional distress.
It's a very clear example of the ripple effect these little bugs can have.
Okay, let's shift gears from the problem to the fight back. This is the deep dive part. How do you actually know if you have bed bugs? Especially since, as you said, bites aren't reliable for everyone.
Right. Detection really means looking for two things. Yes, maybe bites, but more importantly, the physical signs the bugs leave behind.
Okay, let's talk bites first, even though they're tricky. What might they look like?
They're often itchy, red, maybe swollen bumps. Sometimes they look like hives or raised welts. A classic sign, though not always present, is bites appearing in lines or clusters on skin that was exposed while sleeping.
Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Kind of, yeah, though that pattern isn't guaranteed. Sometimes they can even turn into little fluid-filled blisters. But again, the key thing is reactions vary wildly. Some people get huge welts, others get tiny spots, and many get nothing.
So bites are a maybe, but definitely not proof.
Yeah.
What are the smoking guns, the definitive signs?
You need to look for physical evidence, usually in or near their hiding spots. The main signs are small, dark spots, almost like someone dotted the fabric with a marker. That's fecal matter digested blood. You might also see tiny reddish smears on sheets, maybe from squishing a bug after it fed. Then there are the eggs, tiny, pearl white, often stuck in crevices, and also the shed skins, the exoskeletons the nymphs leave behind as they grow. They look like hollowed-out bed bugs.
And I guess the bugs themselves.
And of course, the actual bugs. If you look closely in those seams and crevices, you might spot them adults, nymphs, maybe some that just fed and look different from the flat ones.
Is there Is there a smell associated with them?
Sometimes, yeah. A heavy infestation can apparently produce this distinct odor. It's sometimes described as sickly sweet or maybe just buggy, like coriander or old raspberries, some say.
Okay, so if you suspect something, you basically have to become a detective. Check the mattress, box spring, frame, nearby furniture, look for those dark spots, shed skins, eggs, or the bugs themselves.
Exactly. Thorough inspection is key.
Now let's dive into the science of why they are just so darn hard to get rid of. We touched on resistance, but what makes them so resilient?
Well, beyond just the chemical resistance, their bodies themselves offer some protection. They have these lipid, like fatty substances in their outer layer that can help shield them a bit. But yes, pesticide resistance is probably the single biggest challenge scientifically.
You mentioned things like target site mutations and enzymes.
Yeah,
Can you break that down a bit?
sure. Think of it like a lock and key. A pesticide is like a key designed to fit a specific lock, a target site in the bug's nervous system or metabolism to kill it.
Right.
Well, resistant bedbugs have changed the lock, that's the target site mutation. So the key, the pesticide, doesn't fit properly anymore or doesn't work as well.
Okay, they changed the locks.
And then they've also developed these enzymes, which are like little molecular machines that can chew up or break down the pesticide chemicals before they even reach the lock, or they might flush them out faster.
Wow, so they have multiple lines of defense.
Exactly. And some research even suggests their outer shell, their cuticle, might be getting thicker in resistant populations, making it physically harder for the pesticide to get inside in the first place.
It's like trying to fight a tiny, super-evolved enemy. No wonder it's tough.
It really is. Many of the common pesticides, especially pyrethroids, are facing major resistance issues worldwide. Combining different types of chemicals can sometimes help, and there are newer chemistries, but getting complete elimination with only pesticides can be very difficult, especially in, say, an apartment building.
Is science offering any new hope on the detection front? Since just looking is so hard, especially early on.
Yeah, there's some really interesting work on chemical detection. It turns out if you disturb bedbugs, even just with a puff of CO2, they release specific chemicals, these alarm pheromones like 2-hexanol and 2-octanol.
Okay.
And studies found the more bugs there are, the more of these chemicals you can detect. So the idea is maybe we could develop sensors, like an electronic nose, to sniff out these chemicals and find hidden infestations you just can't see.
Like a chemical sniffer dog, but electronic. That sounds promising. What about tools we can use right now for detection?
Reliable monitors are really important. There are passive ones you just place under furniture legs or near the bed, and active ones that use lures like CO2, heat, or chemical attractants to draw bugs in.
Are the active ones better?
Generally, studies show active monitors tend to capture more bugs and give you a better idea if they're present, especially at low levels. But because spotting them is so tricky, trained professionals are often needed. Some companies even use specially trained dogs' canine detection teams. Dogs can be incredibly good at sniffing out live bugs and eggs in hidden spots.
Wow, sniffer dogs for bedbugs.
Yeah, and critically, in places like apartment buildings, if one unit has bugs, you absolutely have to inspect the neighbors above, below, and on both sides because, as we said, they can travel.
Okay, so detection is a mix of careful looking, knowing the signs, maybe using monitors, and often needing professional help, maybe even dogs. Let's talk prevention. What can people do to stop these things from getting into their lives?
Right. Proactive steps are key here. When you travel, number one, don't put your luggage right on the floor or the bed in a hotel room. Use that luggage rack. They're usually metal and up off the floor, making it harder for bugs to climb aboard.
Good tip.
And do a quick inspection when you arrive. Pull back the sheets, check the mattress seams, look behind the headboard if you can, just a quick check.
And then when you get home from the trip, what's the drill?
Best practice is probably to immediately wash and, importantly, heat dry everything you took, even clothes you didn't wear. High heat kills them.
Okay.
Vacuum your suitcase really well, inside and out. Use a vacuum with a HEPA filter if possible, and then immediately take the vacuum bag, seal it in plastic, and get it out of the house.
Don't just leave it in the vacuum cleaner.
Definitely not. And think about where you store your luggage. Maybe not under your bed. A garage, a basement, or even sealed inside large plastic bags or bins can be safer. For people who travel constantly, there are even special heating devices you can put your suitcase in.
Interesting. Those are great travel tips. What about just general prevention at home?
Number one is being super cautious about secondhand furniture, especially upholstered items or mattresses. Inspect them incredibly thoroughly before you even think about bringing them inside.
Right.
Also, try to reduce clutter around sleeping areas. Less clutter means fewer hiding places. And if you use shared laundry, like in an apartment building, transport your clothes to and from the laundry room in sealed plastic bags. Don't just carry them loose in a basket.
Okay, but let's say, despite all the best efforts, an infestation happens. What are the treatment options? Can you actually handle this yourself?
Well, there are some DIY things that are definitely part of the solution. Thorough vacuuming, like we mentioned for luggage, can physically remove a lot of bugs and eggs. Again, careful disposal of the vacuum bag is critical. And hot washing and drying bedding, clothes, curtains, anything fabric that can take it is very effective because that heat kills all life stages.
But for actually getting rid of the whole infestation?
Yeah, for complete eradication, especially if it's more than just a couple of bugs, getting professional help is almost always recommended and often necessary.
Okay.
You want to look for a licensed pest control company, ideally one experienced with bed bugs, and that uses integrated pest management or IPM.
IPM.
What does that involve? It's not just about spraying chemicals everywhere, it's a whole strategy. It starts with proper identification and a really thorough inspection, then monitoring to see where the bugs are. It includes non-chemical methods, improving sanitation, like reducing clutter, and then using chemical treatments in a targeted, strategic way.
What are some of those non-chemical methods that might be part of IPM?
Mattress and box spring encasements are a big one. These are special zippered covers that trap any bugs already on the mattress or box spring inside so they can't bite you and eventually die. And they stop new bugs from getting in to hide. You have to leave them on for a long time, though, like at least a
A
year.
whole year. Wow.
Yeah, because the bugs inside can live a long time without feeding. Then there's heat treatment. Professionals have equipment to heat an entire room or even a whole house up to about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 49 Celsius, and hold it there for hours. It kills everything, but it's expensive and needs specialized gear.
Okay.
Hot steam can be used for smaller areas, like directly on furniture seams.
Yeah.
Physically removing them, like scraping them out of crevices, is also part of it. And those little interceptor traps that you put under bed legs, they're great for monitoring and catching bugs trying to climb up.
And you mentioned something about bean leaves.
Oh, yeah. That's fascinating research. Apparently, certain bean leaves have these microscopic hooked hairs that physically snag bed bugs like Velcro. They get stuck walking across them. It's not really a practical treatment method yet, but it shows how nature sometimes has solutions.
Very cool. So for the chemical side of IPM, given the resistance problems, how do professionals approach that?
Carefully. They have to follow label directions exactly because these chemicals can be toxic, especially around kids and pets. Because of resistance, just using one type of pesticide often isn't enough. So an IPM approach might involve using several different classes of insecticides, rotating them, or combining chemical applications with those non-chemical methods like heat or encasements. It's definitely a multi-pronged attack.
It sounds like a complex battle.
Mhm.
Are there, like, legal things or policies that come into play, especially in apartments or workplaces?
Yes, definitely. In apartment buildings, for instance, tenants usually have to cooperate with the landlord and the pest control company, letting them in for inspection and treatment. Landlords generally have a responsibility to respond quickly to reports and get treatment underway. Guidelines often encourage inspecting those neighboring units, too.
And in a workplace,
Yeah.
if someone brings them in?
We saw one example policy from Maryland that laid out some procedures. It mentioned that if the source is traced to an employee's home, the employer might require the home to be inspected, though usually the employer doesn't have to pay for the home treatment.
Okay.
But crucially, it also stressed that management needs to treat information about an employee's home infestation confidentially.
And that confidentiality point really leads into something else our sources highlighted, which feels really important, the sort of hidden impact, the cultural and psychological side of bedbugs.
Absolutely. This goes way beyond just the physical bites. Bed bugs create these significant indirect problems. The cost of treatment, the sheer disruption to your life, the emotional stress. Our sources really frame them as a community concern because they spread so easily, and dealing with them takes resources.
And beyond the itch, what are the actual health effects?
Well, the intense itching itself can cause major sleep deprivation, and that leads to problems with concentration, feeling tired all the time, even daytime drowsiness.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And all that scratching. It can break the skin, opening the door for secondary bacterial infections. Things like staph or strep bacteria can get in, causing skin infections that might need antibiotics or antiseptics from a doctor.
So it's not just annoying. It can lead to actual medical problems.
It can, but honestly, maybe one of the biggest, most damaging impacts is the intense stigma that comes with having bed bugs.
Right. That feeling of shame or embarrassment. The idea that having them means you're somehow unclean or did something wrong, even though we know they don't care about hygiene, they just hitchhike.
Exactly that. The sources are really clear about this stigma. People are afraid of being judged, so they hesitate to report infestations. They keep quiet about it, whether it's in their apartment, their home, or even at work.
And that silence must make it so much harder to control the spread.
It's incredibly damaging because if people don't report it, infestations grow, they spread to neighbors, to other areas. It makes the entire problem much, much harder and more expensive to tackle for everyone. That workplace policy mentioning confidentiality, that's trying to address that exact barrier.
It creates this awful cycle where the shame actually helps the bug spread.
It really does. It's a major hidden challenge in fighting them.
Wow. This has been a really thorough look at bedbugs. We've gone from their basic biology and that surprising comeback story to how they sneak into our lives, the tricky science of fighting them, and then this really significant human impact, both physical and psychological.
Yeah, and despite everything we know, all the tools we have with integrated pest management and everything else, their basic biology, their resilience, their resistance, and this ability to spread quietly because of the stigma. It just makes them this really persistent global problem.
So here's a thought to maybe leave everyone with. Considering how deeply their resurgence is linked to our own mobility, our travel, and their sheer biological cleverness, and how much that stigma helps them hide in plain sight, can we as a society really expect to fully conquer a pest that thrives by exploiting both our movements and our fear of judgment?
Or maybe the tougher battle isn't even the physical one against the bug itself, but against that heavy psychological weight, that pervasive social stigma that comes along with an infestation.